Hello, my name's Julie Williams. I'm a registered migration agent with Migration Downunder, and I'm here to talk about how do you sponsor overseas workers. Perhaps you're an employer or you work with an employer that has a need for specialist skilled staff that you can't find in the local labour market here in Australia. And you're wanting to look either overseas, or perhaps you've already identified somebody that has the skill set but doesn't have the required visa to be able to work for you. Or perhaps they have a visa that only has a limited lifespan and they can only work for you for a short period of time or restricted hours. So how do you sponsor an overseas temporary worker? Well, firstly, you need to become a business sponsor. And to become a business sponsor, you need to show that you're actively and lawfully operating, that you've got the financial capacity to be able to sponsor somebody, and you've also got the genuine need to fill the position that you are looking to seek to fill with an overseas temporary worker. So you can't just sponsor somebody because they are good at what they're doing, or maybe they're related to you. There needs to be a genuine requirement to be actually employing this person. It must be a full-time position, and full-time is at a minimum of 38 hours. It can't be on a contract. It has to be through full-time employment as an employee, and the applicant obviously needs to have the relevant skill set as well. So let's break it down into the three components that you need to look at if you're not currently a business sponsor. So there's 3 steps in sponsoring an overseas temporary worker, whether they're here in Australia or whether they're overseas. So firstly, the business sponsorship. As I mentioned, show that you're actively and lawfully operating and have the financial means to be able to sponsor somebody, have a genuine need for the position to be filled by an overseas worker. And then the business sponsorship, once approved, will be valid for 5 years. And that will allow you to sponsor other temporary workers without having to go through that first initial step of setting up an established business sponsorship. Once you've done that, or concurrently with the business sponsorship, you then lodge a business nomination. And the business nomination is for the employee to be able to nominate, or sorry, I should say the employer, to nominate the specific occupation and the person that you wish to fill in that specific occupation. Now, if you're sponsoring through the SID 482 visa, or let's look at the SID 482 visa, the occupation must be on the Consolidated Skilled Occupation List, or more commonly referred to as the CSOL. This replaced the other occupation lists that were out there prior to 7th of December 2024. So you need to have an occupation on the CSOL, and you need to be able to pay market rate salary. This is where so many get confused. What is the market rate? Well, the market rate is determined and dictated by what an Australian is being paid currently in Australia for the same type of role in the same location. There are variants we recognise if you're located in, say, Sydney compared to someone on the Gold Coast or someone in the back of Western Australia, but you do have to show that you're paying the market rate, that what you would pay an equivalent Australian in that same role. At the same time, the market rate for both the Australian as well as the overseas temporary resident must be above $73,150. Plus, you have to pay superannuation on top of that. So the business nomination is part of the position that needs to be lodged every time you wish to nominate and sponsor somebody. The nomination also requires you to do labour market testing, unless there are exemptions to that rule. And the labour market testing needs to show that you have made considerate effort to find an Australian to fill that role. And if you haven't, then you can go and nominate somebody to fill that role. If you must identify the person that you're looking at nominating for that role, and then the visa application, which is the 3rd step in the process for the actual applicant or your employee. If they don't currently hold a SID 482 visa, then they need to be able to show that they've got the relevant qualifications and experience. And what that means, depending on the occupation, they need to have a tertiary qualification plus a minimum of 1 year full-time paid work experience in that role. Sometimes, depending on the occupation, they may have, if it's a diploma level occupation, they may have 3 years relevant experience in lieu of that qualification. Or if it's a degree qualification required, then they would require 5 years in lieu of that qualification to meet the requirement for the 482. They also need to meet English language as part of the requirement for the 482. There is generally no exemptions to that rule for English language requirements. So that is the SID 482 visa. And if there are other options for employers to sponsor people, there could be the subclass 494 if you're located in a regional area, and that is another occupation list again, and that is targeting specific occupations that are in short demand, or short supply I should say, high demand, short supply in regional areas. And that could be an option, the subclass 494. Again, you need to have the business sponsorship, you need to have the nomination, and the visa applicant needs to lodge a visa application. Although the visa applicant does need to have more paperwork required to be able to meet the requirement for the 494. The difference between the 482, 494, the applicant or your employee will need a skills assessment as part of the 494 process. The other option of hiring overseas temporary workers is also a subclass 400, which is the specialist skills work visa, and that is if you need somebody for a specific set of time, usually working on a highly specialised project or a piece of work that you only require someone for usually around 3 months, no greater than 6 months. And then of course there is permanent residency sponsorship, but for today this is what the sponsorship that we're referring to is more hiring of temporary residents, filling them in the roles that you require on a temporary basis that you can sponsor for up to 4 years at a time. If you need any further information, don't hesitate in reaching out to one of our very experienced registered migration agents here down at Migration Down Under.